What is up, my bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite topic, which is the handstand. And in particular, we're going to be talking about the different mediums that you can perform the handstand on. In particular, we're going to be referring to the parallettes and to the floor, and kind of the difference between the two. Before we jump into this video, if you didn't know, I do have a free app available, and in there is several routines, one of which is a handstand routine to help get you started with training. You can grab the download link in the description down below. As I said, it's completely free and it's available on iOS and Android with some big updates coming soon. So let's kick things off and look at the parallettes. Now the parallettes are traditionally used in gymnastics. They're from the parallel bars. Now a lot of people actually introduced to kind of calisthenics and bodyweight will start potentially learning the handstand on the parallel bars. And there's quite a few good reasons that you can start learning on the parallel bars. Number one, and probably one of the most important things with handstands, is it's much less impactful on the wrist. When we're performing a handstand on the parallel bars, our wrists are in a pretty neutral position. When we have to learn on the floor, our wrists go into a much more extended position, which requires more flexibility and puts more pressure through the wrist. And you're most likely to get injured when you first start doing handstands because you're not really used to standing on your hands. So if you can mitigate some of that initial stress of putting weight through your hands by using parallettes, you're probably less likely to get injuries to your wrist, especially initially when you start training. As you get used to doing more and more handstands, the likelihood of injury goes down because you're used to that stress. But for beginners, parallettes can help reduce this. Another benefit of using parallettes is that for beginners especially, it will be easier to balance a handstand on parallettes than it will be on the floor. When we use parallettes, we get a nice firm grip around that parallel bar tube, which we can kind of impart some force and control our balance much easier. This for beginners is especially useful and generally easier than learning to balance on the floor, but the balance itself is different. When you balance on parallel bars, we balance and correct through deviation of the wrist, both ulnar and radial, so it's this kind of rocking backwards and forth motion. When we balance on the floor, we kind of work through extension and flexion. It is a different kind of balance to learn, which kind of brings me on to the main negative when it comes to the parallettes. Although they are easier to balance than the floor, especially for beginners, they won't necessarily give you the skills to balance on the floor. But if you learn on the floor, you will generally be able to balance on parallettes pretty easily or with minimal effort to learn. So that's kind of the main negative. It doesn't have the same transfer over because the floor is harder to learn on. My other bugbear with the parallettes is that you need them to do a handstand. I think part of the beauty of doing handstands is that you can do them anywhere, anytime, without anything but yourself and a surface to perform the handstand on. If you only learn on parallettes, then you kind of need them to be able to do your handstand. So you either need to take them with you or they need to have some there. As I said, it doesn't work the other way around. So this brings me on to the floor. Now the floor is actually the hardest and least forgiving way to balance the handstand. You have the least room for error because you just have one solid block and you have your hands and your shoulders to kind of correct that balance. There's much less forgiveness, and especially as a beginner, it's much harder to correct balance. As opposed to using parallettes, when we have a decent grip around a parallel bar and would generally be stronger in this position, when you're balancing on your hands, we're trying to squeeze the floor in an extended position. Now this is usually weak for most people, and especially when you start learning, it will be weaker. So it will be harder to control, put force into the ground, and balance your handstand. However, when you do get better at handstands, when you have done them for longer, you'll build up strength here. The other benefit is already been mentioned, and that is if you learn to balance on the floor, you'll generally find it easy to pick up any other mediums that you choose to learn handstands on, whether that's parallettes or whether that's blocks or even canes in the future. You'll be able to pick this up much easier because you've already been able to balance on the floor, which is the hardest, and the others will seem easier and much quicker to learn in comparison. So with that being said, which one should you spend your time learning, whether you're a beginner or an advanced athlete? I think as a general rule of thumb, learning on the floor is probably the best for everyone. It's going to give you the widest range of skills, it's going to transfer over to more things, and in the long term, if you want to take handstands and get really good at handstands, learning on the floor is the way to go. But that being said, if you are concerned about the impact of your wrist when it comes to learning the handstand, parallettes is a good way to learn balance whilst not doing much impact on your wrist. But you can just make sure that you work up slowly, you don't do it every day, you don't do too much handstands. There's lots of other things that you can do to reduce the chance of risk other than just learning on parallettes. But that is basically it for the video, guys. This is kind of my 2 cents on what medium you can perform a handstand on. I know this is kind of a niche topic, but I think there's a lot of confusion out there, and hopefully this kind of explains things a little bit simpler. If it didn't, you can always leave a comment in the comment section down below and ask any questions you have. I'll try to respond to as many as I can, or somebody else from the tribe will do so. If you just enjoyed this video, you can hit that thumbs up button and support the channel. Right next to it is that subscribe button, so you can join the Bodyweight Warrior tribe and don't miss out on any more future videos. But that has been it for this week, guys. I'll catch you in the next episode. Have a strong week and peace.